Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. We are back for another episode of the Freight Pod. I'm your host, Andrew Silver. I'm joined today by Kary Jablonski. I get that last name right?
Nailed it.
Welcome to the show, Kary. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. I've been slacking, if I'm being perfectly honest. I probably owe an apology to my loyal listeners, the Freight Podders, who have been showing up for the last, 4 or 5 months and taking in all this content. It's I've hit, I guess, a bit of a lull, I should say, where not that I've lost motivation, but it's, I don't know, just, how sometimes you get going and things are going well, and then staying consistent is hard. You ever deal with that in your life, Kary?
Oh, life gets in the way. You go to the Super Bowl and you've got other priorities.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm trying to start working again, and I've been looking for a real job. Not that being a podcaster isn't a real job, but today it's not a paying job. I am working on sponsors. So if anyone's out there thinking of how can I get my business, my brand out there, if you've got a good business, I'd be happy to look at it and potentially bring you on as a sponsor. So as the Freight Nation listens, you can partake.
I've got a business, so I don't know. Maybe we take this offline.
Maybe we do take this offline. Speaking of a business, let's talk about your business. Well, let's actually start. Let's start with your presence in the world, Kary. So you are relatively new to the industry, right? 2 years
Yep.
in?
Yeah, 2.5.
And
Let's round up. 3.
2.5, that's fair. Sorry, not meaning to cut you short. And dog years, that's another four
Yeah.
years or so. So what I'm noticing is you've kind of really started to create a presence for yourself, a personal brand for yourself. I've seen it on Twitter, or what they now call X, which was kind of new for me as well. And then I'm really seeing it on LinkedIn a lot. I'm seeing you on a lot of podcasts. I'm almost curious if we're getting to a podcast bubble in the industry where there's just too many, not enough people to interview. So I was listening to you on the Logistics of Logistics podcast to do a little bit of research. And I don't really want to do the same thing everyone's doing, but let's talk about that. So is this an intentional thing you're doing where you're kind of getting yourself out there into the world and trying to get the Trucker Tools name out there?
Great question. I'd say it developed a bit organically, and now I'm being more intentional about it. And I've never been, so just some background on me, I have never been a big social media person. I had a Facebook in high school, but I got rid
No
of it right
MySpace?
after college. I I think I might have been like a little too young for MySpace, or
Okay.
just I stayed away from the computer. Maybe I wasn't. I don't know. Maybe I was a loser. I didn't have MySpace. Uh,
I didn't have MySpace either. I just was curious, what that social environment looked like for you.
no, thank you. Great question. No MySpace. Dabbled in Facebook in high school and college. When remember Facebook party invites? Like that's how you'd find out where the party was that weekend. You get like the event
Yep.
invite. So I had to do that. Um, And then, yeah, never was always scared of Twitter, always really scared of Instagram. You can go to Instagram and look me up, but I have zero posts. I will never post on Instagram. I just have it, when I need to log in and check something out. And LinkedIn definitely was something I always personally found a bit cringy. And then I joined the freight world about, 2.5, 3 years ago. And as I really got to know our customers, specifically, we can talk more about trucker tools if we want to, but brokers live on LinkedIn in a way that I have never seen another, I know it's a huge space, but like niche part of the workforce live on LinkedIn. So it just became a really useful tool for me to start to understand the industry, figure out who was who. I was noticing I have a meeting, I quickly get a LinkedIn request. It was just kind of a social norm that was developing. So it was not an intentional play to build my LinkedIn presence. But then I started to gain, as I built confidence in myself and as a leader in the space and leading the business. I'd kind of type something out, never wanted to I'd kind of write in like half sentences because I didn't want to say anything that was too, forceful. And then, got some good feedback on it. And at that same time, this is probably mid 23, started to become friends with some other folks in the space. Like Reed Lost Alout. I don't know how to say his last name. So Reed, if you're listening, send me a voice note and tell me. But he
Lost
was
a lot.
really, there we go. He was the one who really pushed me to just try it and hit send and see how people respond. And I give him a lot of credit for what he's built in this space in terms of authentic community and just encouraging people to go for it and be themselves. And that was definitely a push I needed. So over the last couple of months, it's definitely been more of an intentional focus of mine. My marketing teams helped me a lot with it, but I'm writing, the vast majority of my own content. I'm certainly tweeting on my own, which and I don't think I really have Twitter down yet, but LinkedIn's been fantastic from a business growth perspective. Like it's generating real revenue for Trucker Tools right now. So I have no plans to stop anytime soon.
You have to follow the money. So if LinkedIn is taking you down that path, then that's where you need to go. And it's interesting you used the word cringe to describe what you thought LinkedIn was. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what about what you were seeing felt so cringe?
The amount of self promotion on LinkedIn, like when you see someone get an internship and say, "Hey, I'm so humbled to announce," it's kind of like LeBron the decision style. Like I'm taking my talents
Yep.
to Trucker Tools. It just felt a little like, really, like is that actually how we feel about our jobs? People talk about their jobs very differently on LinkedIn than they do with their friends or even their coworkers. So that always was a little odd to me. And there's obviously the element of that's true throughout all social media, which with the exception of I think Twitter, which is it's kind of a glorified lens of what's going on. I think Twitter is a little bit more real and off the cuff because of the short form of it. But everything just seemed to be too good to be true on LinkedIn. Um, and now
I've
I'm
pers-
posting
what?
selfies on LinkedIn, and it's kind of crazy to see. I didn't have it on my 2024 bingo card, but here we are.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've kind of thought this is a joke, but like if people were as nice in the real world and supportive in the real world as they are on LinkedIn, the world would be a very different place. And
Oh,
I don't think there'd be any world hunger would be solved. Like I feel like if the world really was as kind and supportive as everyone supposedly is on LinkedIn, then like it would be a different place we'd be living in. That's for sure.
totally, totally. And I think and please, listeners of the Freight Pod, keep me honest. I certainly, I like to share the great things that we're doing at Trucker Tools because we have been in an awesome spot over the last year or two. But I also want to share. I want to be really intentional about making sure that I'm not just posting like fluffy stuff. I want to be more precise and critical in a constructive way when I can be. And I think I'm seeing a little bit more of that on LinkedIn right now. And I'm hoping that's the way we're going, away from just like, great job, rooting for you. You guys are awesome.
Yeah. It's for me. I have like a love hate relationship with LinkedIn. I would say in that what I see today, my feed often frustrates me more than like makes me feel like I'm learning something or seeing something new. It does feel like a lot of self promotional kind of BS. And my I guess recipe. I started posting on LinkedIn during the pandemic. I had not done so prior to that, and I think for me the motivation was as someone who was largely a sales guy or spent a lot of time customer facing in my when I was CEO of Mola, like that's how I spent a lot of my time was out in front of customers.
Yep.
And when the pandemic hit, you couldn't go see them physically anymore. So
Yep.
I think I remember like a month in to the pandemic, I came back to our office. I was the only one in there, and I filmed myself just kind of selling our business. Like I was like, these are our differentiators. This is what I think makes us different. This is what I think you need to be a great broker. And kind of we check these boxes. And I just posted it on the internet. I posted it on LinkedIn, and I'm like, to some extent, I'm putting this in front of all of my competitors to whether they want to make fun of it, steal it, use it themselves, whatever. But I also thought, previously, if I wanted to talk to customers, there are only maybe three or four I could speak to in a day, especially physically if I'm, traveling. Now it's like, if I put something out there, they're seeing this stuff. And if they agree with it, it might lead to some, I don't know, connection or business, who knows? And there was a real tangible moment for me where that kind of happened. And I got a message from someone at a large shipper on LinkedIn, and they were like, "Hey, Andrew, can we chat?" And I thought my first thought was this person must have just gotten left their job
Yeah.
and they're looking to come interview with me. But I was like, yeah, sure, we can chat. And when we did, he said, "Hey, I really like the things you've been posting. If this is representative of how your team operates, then I think you guys should be a carrier for us." And all of a sudden I'm thinking, man, this is not how this usually goes. I mean, I usually have to email someone 10, 15 times before I get a chance. And this guy's reaching out to me just because of the stuff I put on LinkedIn. And so like there is real value. I just think people need to be as authentic as they can be.
Yep.
And I just think I've definitely been part of a group. I've oversold before, I think, and I've done the fluff. At one point, I posted on LinkedIn that Molo was the like Tylenol of the
Oh,
industry for shippers,
no,
and
no. How many leads did that get you?
I think I lost a few customers that day.
Yeah, there you
No,
go.
I just, but the funny, I actually, I did ask some of the people on my executive team, I was like, what do you think of this post? And they're like, do not post that. It is absurd. And then I wanted to prove them wrong, which is why I followed through. It didn't, the analogy did not play. But I do think, my engagement on LinkedIn has grown tremendously from just trying to be as honest and authentic. And it's gotten me in trouble sometimes where I say a little too much, but I'm noticing that's kind of where you're headed. And
Yep.
I think it's why we're sitting here. I don't think I would really know who you were if I hadn't seen some of the stuff you were posting. That got me interested. And that's why I reached out to you to want to talk.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I give you credit for doing video content back whenever that was in 2018, 2019, because that was certainly pre TikTok and Reels and everything. And video content still really scares me, even though I know like it is the most engaging content that you can put on LinkedIn. So that's impressive that you were on that vanguard. But I'm totally with you on, I even if your Tylenol post was, net negative for the business, the cool thing about it is it does LinkedIn lets you test things so quickly. I've done this with Twitter too, where I'm talking to my product team, we've got an idea, I tweet something out, say like, hey brokers, what do you think about this? I get 15 inbounds immediately from brokers saying, no, this is right, I'd actually do this differently. Like the speed that you can test product ideas, messaging, positioning through work social is pretty cool. And one other thought I have about social media too is I don't really use it in my personal life, but work, like, and I'm not saying I'm like a toxic workaholic, but work is a really big part of my life, and I like being able to share some of that with the world and express some of it. And I think LinkedIn is, when you do it authentically, allows you to, I don't know, just like live that out and share it in the same way that people share their personal lives through Instagram or Facebook.
I, I would argue there's a part of it that could feel almost therapeutic, like almost like a release to be able to like, hey, okay, I got it out. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm working on. It validates kind of how you're feeling about the work you're doing. And maybe some
Definitely.
of
I
it's
think we,
ego related. I don't know. Maybe I definitely know I've dabbled. That's where
oh,
I think my posts get off is when I'm like, trying to, maybe not intentionally, but I want to feel good. I want people to know that this is what I did. Like, that's not the winning approach, I don't think. But, and that's part of the problem or a big part of the problem.
I mean, and those are the posts that do the best. And then you go check who liked it every 5 minutes, and the dopamine hits are very, very real. So I definitely have that problem. I think that I don't know what the forum for this is. I think I actually tweeted at your brother once when he was talking about building in public. And I was like, the problem with building in public is that you never, like, I've never been a founder, so I don't know what it's like. And it's got to be so unbelievably challenging. But even taking trucker tools where I have over the last couple of years, so many things have gone wrong in addition to going right. Like probably more things have gone wrong, and there's no place you have to talk. I guess by nature you have to talk about those in like bilateral, non-podcast form until you're well after, like whether it's after an exit, like Molo. There's no place to kind of commiserate over that, and it would be so awesome to like post something on LinkedIn about, hey, we tried this, it fell flat on its face. Does anyone have an idea about something different we could do? And that, I don't know if it's like an anonymous social work network or something, but I think that's a big issue is that you don't get any of that sort of feedback on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's hard to get the real tangible constructive stuff out of it. What hopefully you're getting though is people who can connect to the post and
Yep.
understand the problem you're talking about, and then they're reaching out and setting up conversations on the side. I agree with the concept of building in public. The same way I think it aligns very nicely with a very transparent communication model, which was one thing that I think we did extremely well at Molo for a very long time, was be just extremely transparent, overtly transparent about everything we were doing, the good, the bad, the ugly. And that was kind of what I was trying to do publicly as well. And
Yeah.
there were, we were fortunate. We didn't have a lot of really ugly moments in what we were building. So like, I didn't have to, deal with like, how do I position this kind of problem that's a real issue. But we did have, there was a point in, I want to say late summer of 2020, the first year of COVID, when we were standing by all of our contractual rate commitments and the market was skyrocketing on price.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, our business was literally at the worst margins we'd ever had.
That's
And that was where
crazy.
I was like, this is a moment we could talk about publicly, but we can theoretically spin it positively, like helping our customers understand that this is us going to bat for them. And we let FreightWaves write an article about us, specifically kind of opened the books to them and said, here you go, publish this. Um, Kind of gave them an in-depth look at like what it looks like at a brokerage that's struggling. Cause I think a lot of brokerages, especially the digital ones, lived in these negative margin numbers, but they never wanted to talk about it publicly. And it's like, I'm
Yeah.
comfortable. I think customers and potential employees are very open to buying into a transparent model and buying into like a struggling business if they understand why you're at where you're at. And I think if you communicate the right way, that's possible, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Definitely. And I want to set the record straight. Trucker Tools is not struggling. We're actually in great shape. But obviously things hit the fan all the time. If you have a business where things don't go wrong, please contact me. I'd love to hear more. Um, but I totally agree. And we're hiring for several roles right now, and I've gotten feedback from folks on my team who are the hiring managers that candidates have said they really they do research on us and they check out who's at the business, who's in charge, and the kind of transparent and down to earth nature of our social presence is actually a real draw for them, which I think is
For sure.
awesome because it all comes down to who we can hire. That's the determinant of our success.
Well, who you can hire and who's buying from you. And I think
Yeah.
that there's a real big shift happening in our industry that's generational, right?
Yeah.
And the buyers are getting younger, right?
Yep.
And that's, whether it's your business where you're selling into freight brokers, those buyers are definitely getting younger. There are a lot more people like me in their late 20s, early 30s who are, being aggressive and starting their own brokerages, and doing well. And same thing for the, especially on the employee side, right? I mean, the people who are applying for jobs now, there's an entitlement. I don't want to call it a problem. There's an entitlement reality, and that entitlement is drawn by, or caused by, I guess, like the information age, like the TikTok age, where you can just go on TikTok and get any piece of information, or Twitter and get any piece of information that you want. And I think that's I think that's why people are, like, a good example of this is a few weeks ago, a woman got laid off from her job and she recorded it and put it on the internet.
I saw that.
And like,
Yeah.
the whole world saw that.
Yeah.
And that like immediately changed how so many people view that company.
Hmm.
And so I think like if I think something that you're doing that I think is going to be really beneficial for you is like putting yourself out there, so people not only are getting to know kind of Trucker Tools the business because you're creating a presence for yourself, but they're getting to know who's the face of Trucker Tools, who's the person behind all the decisions being made at Trucker Tools, and do I align with that person? Do I want to work with that
Yep.
person? I think that is a path that more and more executives and CEOs should be taking, because one, it's not that hard. If you've got a good head on your shoulders and you're making good decisions that are in the best interest of your customers and your people, then put that out into the world. Like let people know how you're thinking about things, because it will align you to the right people who want to come work for you, if that makes sense.
Totally. Totally. And on the customer side too, like the social media, it sounds like this is what happened to you kind of with your eureka moment with LinkedIn, but I was at Manifest, I guess it was last week, which is scary. And I met so many people I had interacted with on LinkedIn. So the online to offline conversion channel is absolutely crazy, and it just speeds up. You have so much context about the person, you understand what they care about, you understand what they're thinking about, who else they interact with. So you can really get into it very quickly. And I think that's been by far the most valuable use case for me, is just speeding up that time to understand someone and what their priorities are.
So you're spending a lot of time at conferences now, aren't you?
Yes, I travel a lot.
And what's kind of the strategic thinking behind that being such a big focal point for you personally versus sending a salesperson versus doing other things you could be doing in the business at the time? How are you thinking about that decision?
Yeah. So we do bring our sales team to a lot of conferences and our marketing team and our product team. Like our next big conference that we're going to is the TIA Capital Ideas Conference in Scottsdale, and we're going to have 7, 8 people there. So we do show up in spades, but it's been a priority of mine to be at conferences over the last 2 or so years for a couple of reasons. One is that we were going through a huge founder transition. So our founder, Prasad Galapali, founded Trucker Tools back in 2009 and was the face of the business for 12, 13 years until he and his business partner Murali sold in early 2021. And they had such incredibly deep customer relationships with people who trusted them when they were still building this thing, um, before we were really established in the brokerage tech stack. And Prasad imparted on me from day one when I came in to complete the leadership transition how critical those relationships were. And I think that's probably true in almost any vertical industry like freight brokerage. When you're a software provider, those customer relationships are everything. So it was from day one. I was like, I can't mess this up. Like these guys, these people are friends, advisors, really put so much trust in Prasad and Murali. Like I need to be a steward of those relationships. So I just made it I felt the weight of that personal responsibility and thought I'm not going to respectfully like delegate this to a sales guy. Like, and I love my sales team. We have a phenomenal team, but I thought it was important enough that I be there during like these leadership transitions don't happen often. I think you really got to nail it and you have one chance to land the plane. So that's why I started going to them. The second reason too is like you said, I'm not a freight lifer. I didn't grow up in freight. And I think the easiest way to understand what the heck is happening in this industry is to go to a conference floor. And you certainly someone on the tech side like me, you walk the floor and you see the tech stack in real life. And you can actually, what are the differences between the TMSs and how does this, provider differ from that provider? You can ask those questions and you can visualize it. I'm a very visual person, so it was also to speed up my own learning curve as I got up to speed on the freight world. And now I think I guess I also go to spend time with my teams. We're all remote, and getting in person time is invaluable. So it's easy to do that when I do have folks from my team come in. But I think again, it has been like it was. I didn't set out to become like a freight influencer. That definitely wasn't objective number one when I moved into this role. But I think it's been I now see the compounding effect of it and how if I can be the real steward of the brand and the face of the brand in some ways, how that can just help us tell our story so much more impactfully than sitting behind a computer. So it's a straight up business decision, honestly. It's been and it's easy for me to I've been so involved in every part of the business over the last 3 years. Like I've led the product team, I've led the sales team, I've led the market, I've led every single team that I can get feedback and know exactly who to triage it to very quickly in real time. So just it also allows me to get that feedback back to my team really fast.
What was the biggest challenge in coming into this industry as a non-freight lifer? Because our kind doesn't take too well to your kind all the time.
No,
Us
they
freight
sure
lifers, those just
don't.
born in it, we don't just welcome anybody from the outside. So talk about that a little bit.
Definitely. So that was a challenge because fairly enough, as an outsider, especially as a more of a techie outsider, you get looked at with a lot of skepticism by the freight lifers. Um, so I think the first thing, that I try to keep in mind every day is just to be humble and have humility and approach everything from a place of humility to try to understand what is the day to day of this person now who I'm working with, the customer's life. So I think being really curious and open at the beginning was probably sounds obvious, but the most beneficial thing I could do, and just asking a lot of questions to understand what was going on. And I think something we talked a lot about at Trucker Tools over the last 2 or 3 years is the power of focus and doing a couple things really, really well. And in a space like freight that is so dynamic from a tech perspective, where there's all these new entrants all the time coming in and saying, hey, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this. And it's honestly hard to tell sometimes what companies do. We got so laser focused on a couple of our offerings so that we could actually deliver and put wins on the board for customers. And like, I think that's how I built credibility in the space was, hey, you're unsatisfied with your load tracking and visibility options. These other options you've looked at are not serving you right now. Like, okay, we are only working with brokers. We are going hard at that. Here are all the things we're doing. I will get on a call with you personally, like every 2 weeks to tell you more about it, Mr. Customer. And I think from the customers I've developed and partners I've developed great relationships with, like that sort of, to your point, like kind of transparency about what it is we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're going to do it was really appreciated. Um,
I,
but
I
yeah,
think I
it
think
was hard.
I think you make a very valid, like the notion of like I personally will take accountability for this action
Yeah,
item, for this plan that we have that will make your life easier and allow you to do your job better. I think there's something that a buyer just appreciates in that, especially when it's coming from someone in that C-suite, in that especially in that CEO seat, because they know like the business is supported by this. You know, you're not getting a sales guy who's saying one thing and then the business is going to do another. You're hearing it straight from the horse's mouth that this is what the
yep,
business is focused on. And I think having that humility goes a long way, or that, you know, really the willingness to say, this is what we're good at. These are the things that are not our wheelhouse. We are laser focused on this. This is where we're going to beat the competition, and this is where we're going to add value for you. Having that mindset and that approach when you are at the C level and you are directly on those conference floors saying it to potential customers, that's how you get buy-in. So I think you're
exactly.
thinking about it the right way. But with that said,
Thanks.
you know, you went through a lot there, and let's go back in time a little bit just for a piece here to talk about your background. Like, how
Yeah,
did we get to freight? You know, give us the not the I want like the not 30,000 foot view. Like, let's get into a little bit. I want to know the highlights of your
yep,
career leading up to freight,
yeah.
and I may
So
interject to make you go deeper on certain things. So go
great,
ahead.
great. So I'm from the East Coast originally, and my mom worked in town government growing up. So I was always interested, broadly speaking, in like, how do all these things in the world intersect? Like, I remember looking at, plans of, we're considering putting in a stoplight at this intersection. Like, how is that going to impact how everything moves? So I've always been interested in maps in the built world. It's just always been something it's really fascinating to me. So I think there's always been like some interest on my side. In college, moving away from that, I worked for a student run business for the entirety of my college career. It was literally like 250 college kids running, it's called the Corp, running grocery stores and coffee shops. I was a member of the catering service and I ran the catering service my senior year. And that was my introduction to like building something small together with a team of people you love. I was, I've been in the weddings of my friends from the Corp, and they're, some of the closest people in the world to me. So that really cemented like, okay, I want to go into business. I don't know
Those are
exactly
first
what
days
sort of
of building.
that exactly. And like, just talk about messing things up. Like, we'd go out a Thursday night and then like someone would have forgotten to place the coffee order for Friday morning, and I'm getting a call at 6 a.m. Like, we got to go to Safeway. Just like everything was going wrong, but it was so fun. We actually used to call Fridays. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but we used to call them
Go ahead.
Clusterfuck Fridays because I
There
would,
you go.
I'd get out of class and like you'd have 15 missed calls, and you have to go to the kitchen and just figure it out. So it was a blast. So I knew I wanted to go into business there from there. And a lot of my peers who were a couple of years ahead of me had gone into management consulting. So that was just a very common path of like, this is kind of the intro to business career coming out of school. So I ended up getting a job with Deloitte right out of college in
All
DC.
right, consulting.
I know, I know.
Our industry doesn't love consultants, so this is the
It is,
start of the wrong path. But let's see where it goes.
it is. But you'll be very glad to know I very quickly knew that it was not for me. And that's not to disrespect Deloitte or management consulting. It honestly was a fantastic first job. And you can see the fingerprints that going to consulting left all over me in the way I run the business today. Like, ask my team, rule of three for everything. it makes you so organized, analytical, able to move at very many different levels. So I learned so much very quickly, and I had some really cool jobs. I was consulting for the Navy at one point. I'd go into their pharmacies and evaluate their standard operating procedures. Just get exposed to a lot of really cool stuff. But I knew quickly, like, I didn't want to be advising. I wanted to be in it and calling the shots. So, and I have proof of that in journals I've kept around, like, week 3 on the job. I don't know if this is going to be the path for me. So, got receipts. So, I did a year or two of that, and I was thinking, okay, I want to go work for a business, but like, I don't really know what business to go work for. And that was the time when Uber was really blowing up. And UberX had just come out, and Didi and Uber were going at it in China, and there's all this exciting stuff. And I thought ride sharing just as a concept was really interesting, coming back to my interest as a kid and like, how do things move around a city? So happy coincidence that Uber's operational headquarters in the US was actually in DC. Their kind of product and global HQ was in San Francisco, but the US ops leadership lived in DC where I was. And um, a number of folks had gone from Deloitte over to Uber, so I was able to find my way in there actually through a freight guy, Aman Shahi, who ran product at Motive. So there's a freight connection. He was the one who
Okay.
referred me over to Uber, and I spent about a year and a half, maybe 2 years in the DC office, just helping grow the business. It was very much into like Uber's blowing up hyperscale phase. You're basically everywhere at that point. We were launching some college markets. I was focused a lot on the airports and managing. So whenever you're at an airport and you're annoyed about how do I know where to go to get my Uber, that was my team. So just like doing a lot of really cool operational things. I got a lot more into data, and it was the coolest job ever. Like, I thought I could not have been happier with my job. I worked with such smart people. They were cool. They were, fast moving. They were fun. They were so smart. So I was happy as a clam, um, in the DC office.
And then what?
And and then what? So a goal of mine, in college, I studied abroad, as well for a semester in Scotland, and that was the first time I'd left the country. And I was like, "Holy smokes, there's a world out there. That is the coolest thing." Like, I just grew up thinking kind of New England was the extent of, the universe, and just going to, I was your classic American study abroad student who's just, bopping around, probably not getting, totally culturally immersed, but enjoying herself. And so I really wanted to work abroad at some point in my 20s, because I didn't think I was kind of done with that. So I applied for a program that Uber had called Nomad, where when they were launching globally at that point, they were looking for folks from the US to come drop into other markets and help scale up quickly and impart kind of best practices from the most mature market. So kind of interesting story, actually. I applied for Nomad, this is probably 2017, and I got notified that I was matched to go to Indonesia. And I was so jacked up about it. I didn't know where Indonesia was. I had to go look it up on a map. So I was like, all right, I'm going to Jakarta. So
Was there
I
no apprehension about just up and moving to Jakarta like that, with limited
no,
knowledge of?
no, I was so unbelievably excited. I was 25. I had like I went. I had a lot of friends who had lived abroad at the time. I went to Georgetown, and there was a big emphasis on international everything. So I had some friends who were living abroad, and it just sounded so fun. And I had such great times from, study abroad in college. I thought it was going to be an absolute blast. I was ready to go. I was signed up for Indonesian lessons the next day. I had this tutor named Zaki. We would hop on once a week. I was learning Bahasa Indonesia. Um, so no, I was really pumped.
Okay, how's your
Yeah.
Indonesian today?
Oh, miserable. But it is an interesting language in that as far as I remember, there's not really like a concept of verbs or nouns or parts of speech. So you basically just memorize a bunch of words. So when I was there, I wasn't able to talk fluently with anyone, but I could communicate to like a cab driver, like, hey, I want to go to this place, which is pretty cool. But that's all totally been
So you
deleted
were
from my
working
mind.
for Uber in Singapore, but taking cabs.
I was in Jakarta, which is a very different place from Singapore. But a touche, actually. Maybe they were Ubers. Well, it's actually interesting. They weren't Ubers, and I'll tell you why. So
Did you say Singapore? Or did I make that up just now?
you made it up.
Oh, sorry, bad
And
listener. Sorry, but keep going.
have you been to Singapore?
No, I think maybe we were thinking about it for the honeymoon, and that's why it's in my head. But
I never made it to Singapore. It's supposed to be top notch. Jakarta is a very different place, very close by. It's like a massive, massive, massive city. Indonesia is the fourth biggest country by population in the world. Like, it just crazy place, 17,000 islands. So anyway, got told I was going to Jakarta. I was like, let's go. I'm going to sublet my apartment because I don't want to have to pay for my apartment while I'm there for like 5 months. So I'm going to put all my stuff in storage, get out of my apartment. And at this time, Uber was definitely kind of tightening up its own internal processes as opposed to me just hopping on a plane and working there. I had to go through a visa process, and Indonesia has quite a bit of red tape when it comes to foreign visa permitting. So I ended up getting delayed by a little bit. So I was kind of hanging around DC, taking my Indonesian lessons for a couple of months, waiting to go. And as we're getting closer and my visa is almost ready, I start hearing these rumors that Uber is going to divest from Southeast Asia and sell the business. So I'm just kind of like, an underling at that point. I know I'm not that important, but I was like, oh, that's concerning because like it's my
Slightly.
dream to work abroad, and I'm like all my stuff is in storage and I'm like ready to go. So I kind of emailed some folks and they were like, nope, we're investing in the business, go. So I ended up getting my visa and hopping on a plane in mid-March 2018. Get to Indonesia, like definitely apprehensive about like, is this business going to exist? Like, is this all about to fall apart? So I spent the weekend in Jakarta, and then, my first day at work, Monday morning, 8:30 a.m., first meeting is an all hands in the Indonesian office. Just to set the scene, it is me coming from America with 100 Indonesians on the top floor of this massive office building in Jakarta. And they have the all hands. They're like, yep, we sold the business to Grab. We're divesting from Southeast Asia. Like
Oh boy.
everyone, everything's shut down right now. Like your laptops are turned off, your emails are turned off. Everyone's crying. Everyone's like, who are you? Are you HR here to like fire us?
Did you
And I
do
was
this
like,
to us?
yeah, I was like, I was supposed to come work with you
You're like, I'm
guys.
25. I don't know what's going on. I can barely
I have no
understand
idea
what you're
what's going
saying.
on. And it was wild. Like, I mean, people were really upset and this is like the intense
Of
ride
course.
sharing war days. Um, Thankfully, like I was still a US employee. I didn't make an official transfer, so I was fine. But I was just like, what the heck? I just spent months preparing for this, and it was devastating to me. I thought like I'm never going to get to work abroad now. This is all it just felt like it's all over. So it was really, really interesting. Like I ended up becoming good friends with some of the folks from the Indonesian office because I stuck around for a while and transitioned. They had to move all the Uber drivers over to Grab, so there was no Uber in Southeast Asia when I was there. And it was just like an emotional, intense experience. And I think that like the big lesson for me with that was, and I say this knowing like I am people's boss, a lot of people's boss, and I take that job really seriously. But like companies are like, we exist in this capitalist society, and companies do what they need to do at some points, and like you need to look out for yourself. And I would say that to anyone on my team, anyone I'm advising. I'd say it to myself, like you can never, you always you in the world we live in, you have to be looking out for yourself. And um, I think it was just a good lesson for me to learn at that point, that Uber wasn't there to take care of me. It was a great employer and I loved it and I learned a ton and I have a lot of friends from there, but I had to take care of myself.
Yeah. I
So
mean, yeah, that's, I think, a very, that makes sense. I'm
yeah.
aligned to that. So what'd you
So
do?
so I took a couple weeks off. I traveled around. I did my little eat, pray, love Bali vacation, which was awesome. And meanwhile, I was trying to figure out, where am I going next? So I could have gone back to the DC office, but I ended up, with Uber support, was able to find another role in Mexico, in Mexico, um, to support their ride sharing team as Didi, the big Chinese company, was entering Latin America. So ended up
So you
moving to
got your
Mexico.
abroad moment, kind of.
Oh yeah. Oh, I definitely did. Yeah. So I ended up going to Mexico. I was originally going to be there for 3 or 4 months. Ended up staying for 18 or 19, I think. I transferred full time to the Mexico City office. I worked primarily on Uber Eats while I was down there, on the Latin American kind of expansion, building that whole region up. And then left Uber, um, summer 2019, right after the IPO.
What would you say are any lessons that you took from that business, your time there, that kind of stick with you in what you're doing today?
I think Uber DNA is all over the way we run Trucker Tools. My COO slash CFO, Rohit Bezawada, who's awesome, is also ex Uber. So he and I definitely run with that sort of mentality, which is, I think a lot of companies say they're data first, but that's not actually true. Like Uber, it was expected that every single person there, support, operations, marketing, could use SQL and pull data to support any hypothesis they had. Like if there wasn't a detailed analytical viewpoint on something, no one was going to listen to you. Your idea was never going to get considered. So I think that's been big for us in embedding data and the way we think about our product, our customers, their success. Um,
Do you,
and go
so
ahead.
you would argue that Trucker Tools is a very data first company.
Yes.
And would you define data first as kind of how you just described that Uber mentality of every hypothesis you have must be supported by the data?
More
Would
or
you,
less. So
yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. It's not to say like you have to prove everything out with data because we get signals and we take bets and we run experiments. But I think it's more about the culture of experimentation, probably. Not that there must be a nice 5 paragraph essay or deck supporting something with a bunch of pretty graphs. It's more like, okay, you think this is going to be the case. Let's test it. Let's set up a quick experiment. Let's pull the data and have a conversation about it and then make another move quickly. So it's just like hyper experimentation pace.
I don't know what the answer to this question is, but do you think there are any potential downsides to that approach? Like where you could miss something or like where emotion does play a bigger factor than data in a certain situation that you've seen?
Certainly, like, when you're interacting with people, absolutely. And I think Uber had plenty of its own baggage when it came to not considering that always in the most, effective way, certainly in the TK era. um I hope he's not, listening to this podcast. But
I doubt
um
it.
yeah, that'd be sweet. But so yes, and I feel like to think we strike a good balance there where like I said, I'm on calls with customers every single day. I'm talking to people, I'm committing to things. Like I'm hearing their pain, I'm walking through how they do their work every day and using that to inform ideas. But when it comes to making decisions about what's going to be the most, what's going to drive the most return for a customer, what's going to allow us to be, provide the most visibility possible, how do we scale our ELD program as fast as possible? Those are all, I think, things that need to be data driven, and that's allowed us to grow really quickly. The interpersonal, like management stuff, of course, I think you're totally right. That has to be done really, interpersonally and with emotion kind of at the forefront.
I almost wonder if there's a generational aspect to this in that like our generation is maybe most data prone because it's just we're growing up in the age where people have learned how to leverage technology to get the most out of data. So like you don't see it maybe as much in older generations. And
Definitely.
I would, and this could be a reach, but I'm curious if when you get to Gen Z, there's going to be a reversion away from data almost because it feels like Gen Z is a little more emotional than others. I don't know. I could be way off here, but I'm trying to, when I think about Gen Z, it's a different animal than what we have today. I don't know.
That's really interesting. I think you should do a podcast with a Gen Z member of the freight community and focus on that. Or you could do like a millennial and a Gen Z and talk about their different approaches to work.
Yeah. Because I don't even, are the Gen Zers in the workforce yet? Or are they,
Yes.
they are?
Gen Z,
Okay.
yeah, Gen Z tops out right now at age 27. So you've got,
Oh,
you know,
okay. You were almost there.
okay, yeah, almost. I do get
Just
asked
kidding.
that a
Sorry.
lot. How old am I? But
No,
no,
we won't go down that path.
I'm squarely a millennial. I want everyone to know, and I'm proud of it.
Proud to you aged up into the millennial
That's
workforce.
right. That's right.
I got us sidetracked here. What were we talking about? So we were talking about lessons. We were talking about data-driven approach at Trucker Tools. So we were going down the path of post Uber. Or I'm
Yes.
sorry, post Indonesia. You get to Mexico, and then did we? We moved on from Uber. Where did we go next?
Yes. So, the freight community is not going to like this one either, but I got my MBA and
Oh no, you don't
I
belong
know,
here.
I
I'm just
know. I
kidding.
usually try to gloss over that one, but
You're too smart for
basically,
us.
no, I'm definitely not. Uber was awesome. I learned a ton. The company, had grown a lot and was a public company, so I knew I wanted to go do something else. And I was considering a couple of different opportunities, like whether to go join a startup and really try my hand at building something a lot earlier stage. Ended up also applying for some MBA programs and had an awesome opportunity at Kellogg at Northwestern in Chicago. So moved up from Mexico City to Evanston and spent 2 years that overlapped with quite a bit of COVID, unfortunately, doing my MBA.
And did we learn anything in business school, or is it all a farce?
We did learn a lot in business school. No, I think it was such a fantastic experience for me. I wasn't been business undergrad. I was a liberal arts major, so it was nice to go through some of the, actual academics around accounting and all that jazz. But I think more than that, it helped me mature for 2 years and think about it helped me mature. It helped me learn about all of the paths that were available that I could go down. It just gave me a lot of context around here's a ton of different things you can do to make a difference in the world. And more than anything, it introduced me to amazing people, professors, classmates alike, who continue to have a really big impact on me several years out of the program. So I think a lot of the business school academics, it's not about like learning what a debit and a credit is. It's more about how do I analytically approach this problem and pattern match across, these are how other companies have approached this. And then think about Kellogg's really big on kind of personal leadership and everything's a group assignment. So how do you show up in a group and lead a group of people and develop followership? So I
And I've
recommend
heard
the MBA. I know that's going to be controversial for the
it's not
audience.
really
Feel free to
controversial.
DM
It's
me.
it's it's from everyone who I know who's done it, I think one of the biggest things most people talk about is just the network they develop.
Yeah,
But yes, for those that that I know who have gone down that path, they talk a lot about the network they developed. Would you kind of experience a similar perspective
definitely.
experience?
I was on 2 calls today with two of my classmates from business school talking freight. They're investors in the space and are looking to understand what's happening, walking them through different tech stack. So, I mean, they're like very real kind of business revenue related implications. Um, I've got some awesome professors who I keep in touch with who are really grounding and helping me think through what this experience has been like. And I think most importantly, I've made some amazing friends who I'm going to be, close with for the rest of my life. So it was absolutely worth it.
Yeah. And coming out of that, did any of your perspective on what you wanted to do with your life change at all? Like what was kind of like the motivation once you finished that process?
Yeah, so I actually that's how I got to Trucker Tools was through business school. So I I was looking for a full-time job after I graduated to, start making some money again. And
Yep.
I was introduced to the concept of again, I didn't know anything about the investing world. And I was introduced to the concept of these investment firms, not just investing money in companies, but actually investing talent and people and kind of operating the operations into businesses. And I met the now owners of Trucker Tools, a company, parent company is called Alpine Investors, and ASG is their software company, who had just bought the business and were looking for someone to come in and steward it into the next phase. That's always the MO with Alpine. It's when founders are looking for a full transition. And Prasad and Murali were, had gotten it to an incredible place. We're looking to go do something else. So they needed an operator to come in to manage that transition period and then, lead the business into the future. And we're looking at MBA students, which again, I think MBAs definitely get a bad rap, and I understand why. But I do think you find some incredible, not to toot my own horn, but some awesome talent there. And I had this kind of nice generalized toolkit, especially from my experience at Uber, where I was just working on how do I grow this business? How do I try things quickly? and then how do I, start building a team around me, that it was an awesome fit. So coming out of business school, that was the job I had, was coming into Trucker Tools right after the sale, and working closely with Prasad and Murali through the transition, and then eventually stepping into the CEO role in 2022.
So you're a hired gun, so to speak.
Yeah, I am a hired gun, exactly.
So what was that like being hired in? Did you know when you joined Alpine that Trucker Tools was where you'd end up, or you kind of joined TBD?
I joined Alpine and then matched with Trucker Tools. So um, I looked at a number of companies based on kind of what I was looking for, what the company needed, and we found a good fit for me and Trucker Tools.
So when you
So yeah,
got to
also
the
didn't really know what
business,
my life was going to be like. Just
that's
figured
fair.
I'd figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you find out you're matched to Trucker Tools, my understanding is you didn't know much about freight at the time. So what
That would
were
be
kind of
that would be correct.
so what were kind of the initial thoughts you had about the industry, like coming into it, the preconceived notions that were kind of running through your head, if you remember?
First of all, so I was familiar with freight from Uber Freight, but that was definitely they ran that business very separately from ride sharing and from Uber Eats. So, I was up to date on what it was doing, but I didn't know the details. So I was just really struck by how massive the industry was. I just remember thinking, like, how are there 17,000 freight brokerages in this country? That is crazy. And some of them are so huge. So that was really, really surprising. Um, and then, it's going to sound obvious, and I'm sure every tech person who comes on says this, but I just couldn't believe how old school some of these businesses were, with people hopping on the phones, and, things are just happening. Not everything's getting documented. And um, just like how much opportunity there was to improve the way that these things ran to make it, more effective for everyone. Um, I was pleasantly surprised by how much fun it is. I think my personally, I love the space. It's fun. I think that's why I go to all these conferences too, is I just enjoy it. I like talking to these people. I think everyone's really down to earth and kind of no BS, tells you how they see it. So I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I don't know if I would have jived in the same way with I don't know, whatever other random industry there is.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you come in as this late 20 something CEO with zero kind of freight experience or even software build. I guess you call Uber a software business. That's fine. But what was that like coming into a business as the CEO without kind of having the repertoire behind you? I mean, clearly a great educational history, but what was that experience like?
It was also one I had to approach with a lot of humility, because I knew that the most important thing for me to do was to build trust and gain followership among the team. Like that was the only job from day one. Was I set up, I talked to every single person at the company. I, wanted to hear their personal story, their background, what they cared about, what they want to do with their life, and just like get these people's buy-in first, to like, I am a human person here in service of you, as opposed to like come in and suss things out. So I'm sure, like, I'd love to ask some people what their reactions were to me immediately. I think I was pretty fortunate. The team was pretty welcoming, and I was very welcoming. And I think a lot of that probably it didn't hurt, that I just got really kind of down to brass tacks from the start. I had all this, I had operational experience, and I was able to say, like, okay, you guys need help building a process for this. Like, send it my way. Like, I love Google Sheets. Let me just help build this and train you up on it. So I think something I did well at the start of that was just like put quick wins on the board that people could get behind, and then build trust that I am, a force for good here, and here to help build, as opposed to just kind of come in and call the shots from the hip. But it was, yeah, I think customers too, like very, very rightfully so, were, somewhat skeptical of me. And that's completely fair. I would feel the same way. Like, who are you and why are you here? So I think that too also just, it just takes time with relationships. You have to meet with people enough times. I got on the road. I visited people in person. I went to every conference. Um, and I think like the only way you can build trust is by doing what you said you were going to do. So I was really, really committed to when we said we were going to do something, we executed it. I followed up. I said, hey, did this work? Great. Okay, let's do it again. And just like get that cycle going while simultaneously with the team helping anywhere I could.
And I guess now it would probably be appropriate for me to give you a chance to describe what the business is with 55 minutes in.
That's no one's listening for
I have
that.
another question that isn't that, but let's do it now and then we'll keep going.
Sure. So Trucker Tools is a set of tools, spoiler alert, for brokers and carriers. So our two main broker products are visibility and capacity, and we also have a mobile app for carriers focused on owner operators and small fleets that powers both of those. The brief history of the business is we started in 2009, really as this is all again all credit to Prasad and Murali and their vision, the OG app for truckers. I didn't have I had like a flip phone at that point, and they were building a smartphone app. So it's pretty remarkable what they did over the course of the 2000s. Built these tools, way station locators, truck specific routing, um, truck stop reviews, Walmart finders in this free app, and carriers used it, loved it, kept it on their phones. From there, developed those two tool sets I mentioned: load visibility, load tracking first, and then our capacity tools later. That have really grown into kind of the core of the business as it is today. So we track millions of loads a year, and we match hundreds of thousands of loads from broker to carrier.
Why was it free?
The mobile app.
Yeah.
Prasad really wanted to help the owner operator. So he was at Get Loaded. You should interview Prasad. That's another guest for
I
you.
will.
He was at Get Loaded, which eventually sold to DAT, I think in 2007 or 2008, and was a
I
load board.
remember Get Loaded. I mean, when I was first booking loads in 06, 07, we used Get Loaded as like that was one of the systems or one of the matching team apps, so to speak, or websites.
I was on a Twitter space a couple weeks ago at night with a bunch of freight folks, and some guy was like, wait, I said something about Get Loaded. He was like, I still have a sign that says like Get Loaded at the happy hour from a TIA event or something back in 2008. So he sent me a photo of it. It's pretty funny. But yeah, so Prasad was at Get Loaded, so he knew the space and he knew like the plight of the owner operator. And I think he genuinely was like, and this is what I think the way that a lot of great businesses are built is like find a problem and solve the problem, and the revenue will come if you're actually solving the problem. So you realize, life as a truck driver, as an owner operator, is really freaking hard. Especially at that point, you're probably still printing out MapQuest directions. So having a digital assistant to support you on that and just getting that in the hands, it was going to become more powerful. It was almost like a Waze, and that like truckers would add in more information as they used it out on the road. So being able to get it at scale and get it into more folks' hands is going to make the tool that much more powerful. So I think he had the kind of vision and composure to say, I'm not just going to like release app and charge $4.99 for it. I'm going to actually drive like real value in this, and then we'll figure it out. And that's, again, still very true. We play in we our only paying customers are brokerages.
Well, how many carriers or trucks are on the app?
We have 350,000 monthly active users. So
Okay,
a lot.
so I mean that the entry point to building this business is, I think, unique in the visibility space. In that, I don't think anybody else in the visibility space has started by creating this tool on behalf of the carrier that solves a lot of their problems for free, and then creates a separate kind of business with all that data. And well, not that a person is data, but it is in the sense that like
Yeah.
it's an entry point.
Exactly. Exactly. We had a very different approach from any of the other visibility providers, and we've done a lot of this. We've got the ELD scale now. We built all of that up, so it's great that we have. I think something that does differentiate us still is that we started out again so long ago. When you think about talk about emotion, like carriers, rightfully so, need to be skeptical of a lot of these new things that come on the market, but they trust our brand. They trust the way we use their data and that we only do what we say we're going to do with it. And that allows us to have this crazy insight into your crazy, visibility for brokerages as a result.
Well, it definitely speaks to there is especially what I would argue is in the older population of drivers, there's a little bit of that tinfoil hat mentality. And I don't mean to lump everybody into one bucket. It's not everyone, but there are a lot that are skeptical. I remember as a broker, one of the biggest challenges is getting consistent tracking
Yep.
electronically. And the expectation now is not just that you're going to be tracked electronically for a customer or for a shipper, but also that you'll be tracked with consistency, which means that the driver can't be turning their phone off and whatnot. And that's a challenge for brokers. And a lot of it does stem back to a carrier or a driver who's sitting there thinking, I don't trust you. Therefore, I'm not willing to just give you, you know, unrelenting access to my stuff. And so
Exactly.
if you have that built-in trust, I could see why that's a key selling point to get brokers working with you.
Exactly. Exactly.
So as you came into the business now, what was the expectation? Like, what was the expectation from your PE owners or your
Yeah.
boss, so to speak, as you were coming into this?
Grow the business as much as possible and make this the best business in the world. Like that is truly my mandate, is to blow this thing up. So, um,
And
got
how much of your approach coming into that was just be laser focused, be laser focused on the product that we have today and just double it, triple it, quadruple it, versus we've got to try new things or do different things to expand. Like, how are you thinking about that?
yeah, the first 3, 4 months, I took a do no harm perspective. I was doing all these things where I knew I could add value quickly, you know, dashboards, processes, bringing people together, operating rhythm, all of that. But I didn't want to make any big strategic calls because I didn't know enough to do that. So I just spent it, again, talking to customers, talking to partners, talking to employees, figuring out what's going really well, what can we change, what does the industry need. Um, and the timing was also really interesting because I came into the business in October 2021 and I officially moved into the CEOC in April of 2022, which
Oh
coincides
boy,
with when everything blew up. So I don't,
everything blew up in the
yeah,
wrong direction, right?
exactly, exactly. Everything went south. And so I don't really remember those COVID, good times that everyone
You
talks
didn't
about
you
as
didn't get
much.
the COVID good times.
No, I didn't, which again makes me so freaking proud of what we've done because I think we've just identified these crazy pressing needs and gaps in the market, and we've been able to grow the rate we've grown at over the last 2.5 years when like the tide has come out on everyone is like such a source of pride for me and my team. So yeah, I spent the first couple of months just figuring out like what is working, what is not working well, and we have two real core tool sets for brokers. One is on the visibility side, the second is on the capacity side. And very quickly, at capacity, of course, was all the buzz in 2020, 2021, and that changed on a dime in 22. And we saw this massive gap in the visibility market. We'd played there. We'd always been, in the load tracking space, but we just saw this opportunity to um, become the premier brokerage tracking product by doing a couple of things. One was doubling down on our ELD integration scale. So we're really proud about where we've gotten that to, and the ease with which carriers can integrate and the scope of our ELD integrations and the quality of them. Our mobile app is always the bread and butter. So just continuing to double down on that sort of reliability, making sure that we're staying top of mind. We're revamping the mobile app to come later this year, which is going to be a really exciting release, and then introducing a couple of other tracking methods. We've got API integrations directly with larger fleets to expand more into the big fleet category when we had historically been focused on owner operators. And also, we introduced a text to track and WhatsApp to track product to collect kind of the stragglers, and then built out cross border toolkit. We just made a lot of investments in visibility during that first 2022 year when I think everyone was like, the world, it was bleak times. And I think that really paid off because our insight was that shippers are or taking back the upper hand, and they're going to demand insane service levels. So if we can be a badass visibility tool, we're going to, blow up right now.
So you're so right. I mean, the pendulum swings, and we are definitely have firmly for the last, let's call it at least, I don't know, 18 months, the shippers have had the upper hand,
Yeah,
and they are making those decisions. Not only do they tend to increase the service level expectations on like on time service, but they start to enforce other things that in bad markets or down or challenging markets for them, they don't enforce as much because it's just find me a truck. Tracking is a big one for that. I
yep.
actually heard this recently from two top brokers. There's a Fortune, I would call it 50 or so shipper who's now requiring on their reefer loads that the brokers provide updates every 15 minutes on the temperature of the product in the trailer.
I know exactly the shipper you're talking about, and
It's
we
not
already have.
feasible, first of all,
Well, we can take that one
at
offline, but
scale in brokers. But go ahead, actually. I'm curious your thoughts on this.
so we are integrating. We've done all the development to integrate with that specific network, so that will have real time temperature ingestion by that May 1st date that everyone's talking about in the industry right now. Um, I don't think the necessarily, there's some things on the rollout of it, on kind of the mandate from the shipper that could have been done a little bit differently to drive more clarity around what was required. But those are exactly the things that we've been able to move fast on as we got wind of that from a couple of customers. I can't believe how many brokers work with said shipper. It's pretty remarkable. And
But
we
you're
we
telling
built
me
the
it's doable.
integration. Yeah, we have the integration. It's development complete. We're just waiting for the credentials from the shipper.
Interesting. Because my understanding is, other than, I mean, I think there are certain reefer carriers that certainly can provide that information. And I guess if you can get the integrations right, whether it's API or whatever, that it's doable. It just, for a broker to do it, because if a broker makes a commitment on a lane, it's not, especially if there's enough volume, which there is in this case. This is a large company that ships a lot of refrigerated freight. um, one broker might be using 100, 200 different reefer carriers a month on this, and it doesn't mean they're bad carriers, because
Yeah,
it's you don't have as much density in the reefer market where you're just going to get the same carrier taking the same load over and over again. So like not every carrier is positioned to provide that to brokers, and I think it's a situation where a lot of the brokers are going to kind of fall on their face here, and the shipper's probably going to realize like maybe this isn't as easily done as we hope. But
I I think that's fair. But from a tech perspective, it's feasible and done. But I think when it comes to actually like is I think what you're saying is there
operationalizing
enough?
it.
Yeah, is there enough reefer capacity in the market that to service this one customer in such a way like that that is a totally different problem. Maybe it'll drive reefer rates up.
I mean, it might for them.
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of, this is the time when they can test stuff. I mean, it does seem like people are insinuating the market might be upticking. Do you guys dabble at all in the pricing world, or trying to get? Is that a potential add-on feature for you down the road, or not really your cup of tea?
So we integrate with pricing partners. We're integrated with Sonar right now for both brokers and carriers, and they're able to view that track data in on the broker side and our capacity tool and set some negotiation parameters around that. And we also have a mobile app. On our mobile app for carriers, we give them, provided they're a small enough fleet, we give them some kind of relative information about hot lanes and cold lanes. So we talk to pricing partners, but we're not in pricing ourselves. What we do see is, we see volume in the way of tracked loads because we have all that, and that's like real moved freight data. So we're able to see what volumes look like. And I can assure you they are down, but we have seen some upticks. Really this week around. I think produce season is here. So
Should
excited
be.
to. Yeah, yeah. It's here. It's warm outside. So I'm excited
Ooh,
to see if that happens.
I would
Things
think
pop a
La
little.
Nina would mean, I'm being told, like, I'm not educated in this, but I'm being told La Nina is the reason it's so warm. I mean, you and I are both living in Chicago. This February, we've had days in the 50s. Assuming that's true everywhere, it's fair to assume. I mean, I did move a lot of reefer business. Granted, it's been a minute since I was like in the weeds in it, but my understanding historically, you get produce season, like true produce season. You get some citrus season out of Florida in February, but like true melon produce season usually starts in April. I could see if they had a very, very warm winter, why there might be harvesting happening earlier. And listen, the industry needs it. So, all the brokers out there, which I think comprises a decent chunk of the listenership of the Freight Pod, we are cheering for you to see the turnaround. I
Big
know
time.
it's been a long couple of years, but like it's coming back. Just stick with it. The opportunity will be back before you know it.
Yep.
Maybe not before you know
Well,
it,
I,
but soon enough.
I think we need to talk about meteorology more in freight. And I'm sure FreightWaves is doing something on that. I know Kaylee's a meteorologist by training. So, yeah, I don't know if La Nina is going to push us earlier into produce season. We're going to have a bountiful harvest. And that would also hopefully drive some food prices down. So,
Yeah,
could
that
be
would be
great.
nice.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as I think about, we just talked about the pricing concept and partnerships. So your business is really interesting to me in that you have access to such a large pool of drivers, which makes opportunity is plentiful in terms of what you could do with your business. Yes, you are attracting a visibility and capacity business today, but how do you think about the nature of partner versus doing it yourself? Because with the access to drivers and carriers that you have, there are a lot of types of businesses, whether it was insurance or
Yep.
factoring, that you could easily plug into what you're doing and just immediately increase your revenue stream because you just have this unique capacity at your fingertips. So, how do you think about what you should be partnering with someone for to get a small piece versus build it out yourself?
Yep.
Um, how do you think
Great
about that?
question. You should join our board. We can, talk about this in depth because these are the sort of
Hey,
conversations we have. Yeah, there we go. Uh, so we have always been free for carriers, and that's been really important to the identity of Trucker Tools. And like we talked about, the trust and the brand equity we have. So when we think about anything on the carrier side, it needs to be really in service of that kind of, you know, truck driver Prasad was focused on 15 years ago. When it comes to partnering versus building ourselves, the right now we are so focused. We actually do a lot for kind of the amount of folks we have on the team. We're a pretty lean team. We're only about 50 people. So yes, there are a million ideas I have around we could do this, we could do that, we could do this. But I think right now we're really pumped about like there's so much more opportunity just in the kind of two broker categories that we're in right now that we're just focused on those because we know them so well, we've learned so much about them, like that's where we want to grow. um
How much
and
meat do you think is on that broker bone?
oh, a ton. I mean, even like visibility, even just as a single category, we're still in the
Like
early innings of that.
you could 10x the business just with focusing on what you're doing well now.
Yeah, definitely. So
Okay.
the addressable market is there. So do I want to distract us with another category that we're going to have to get totally up to speed on? I That's something we always have to weigh. And is it going to really add strategic value to us as a business? And we're just, we are, there's so much we can do in the visibility game right now that we're so pumped about that that's where I really want to focus a lot of the business's energy.
It makes sense. It reminds me of my own business that my team and I built at Molo because we were like damn near 100% truckload. I
Yeah,
mean, we moved a couple LTL loads, we moved a couple intermodal loads, but we had no interest in prioritizing those things simply because I was like, we could spend the next 2 decades on just truckload and 10, 20, 30x our business. There's no need to venture in these things that we don't necessarily know as well. I
right.
mean, it was arguably a big driver for why we sold ArcBest because they were so good at something else. They were literally one
Yeah,
of the best in the industry, if not the best at LTL. So we're like, hey, let's let them focus on that. We'll focus on the truckload. Happily married. Let's run. So I'm definitely understanding your perspective there. Do you have any
Riches and
partnerships that you're
niches is
riches
what
and
they call
niches?
it. That's
Yep,
it.
riches and niches. Are there any partnerships you're working on now that would extend the kind of service offerings or make the life easier for the carrier?
Yeah, we're talking to folks all the time. Like I said, we're revamping our mobile app later this year. It's kind of looked and had the same feel for a long time. So we're going to give it a facelift, make tracking and booking a lot easier. And then that third part of our carrier presence, which are those tools for life on the road. We're talking to a lot of partners right now about what that looks like and where we can double down and how we can, like I said, there's a lot of experimentation we can do around what do carriers really need. We totally redoubled our focus on getting carrier feedback this year as well. We've got a big team going to Mats. We've got a carrier feedback group. So we're really working to understand. And I think again, something that's really important to us is like doing something with intention, not just like throwing paint at the wall and seeing like which of those things stick and how do we make, $200 off of something. It's like if we're doing something, we want to do it big.
And is there any feedback that you can share with the world that you've gotten from the carrier or driver community that's you know insightful or helpful?
Yeah. Again, I probably sound like a broken record just talking about tracking all the time, but it is so top of mind. The something that is this doesn't actually pertain exactly to the mobile app, but ELD tracking is no longer like seen as much of an evil by carriers as it once was. Like I think there's been a big shift in that. There's still plenty of carriers who don't want to track with ELD, so that's why they use our mobile app. But I've been interested over the last year or so to see the shift, and I would hypothesize there's a couple things going on. One is the generational shift in truck drivers. Like that's an episode that I think would be interesting. Like what is life as a Gen Z truck driver with, where you've been sharing all of your data from birth. So like who cares if you
Mm-hmm.
connect your ELD? I think that could be really interesting. So we're starting to see that play out. I think there's been a lot more education around the ELD and what data is and isn't getting shared when you're using it. But we've just seen a lot of interest and appetite from carriers to move from a mobile to an ELD setting. I think too because of those higher service levels demanded by shippers, they know that they're going to be able to hit those scorecards if they're using an ELD. Whereas mobile app, you still do always run the risk of a battery dying or um, being in a dead spot. So I think that's been something that surprised me a bit.
Yeah, that is interesting. I wonder if many drivers have just kind of finally gotten over the kind of innate desire to fight the ELD, and just kind of accepted this is the way the business runs now. And I don't need. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of carriers still out there
Oh
scheming
yeah,
like there always will be, but I just think maybe the general population has moved more towards acceptance and then said, hey, listen, if it's easier to track that way, let's just do that.
definitely,
So,
definitely.
well, let's dive into what you would argue is maybe the biggest challenge you've dealt with. You came in as a young CEO into this business. It's been 2.5 years in the industry. What's the most difficult thing you've had to do?
I have two different answers. One is doing this during this freight recession. Like I said, I moved into the CEO role like a month after rates went off an absolute cliff. So going from an environment where we were positioning ourselves as a business differently and the buyer environment was very, very friendly and like, yeah, sure, yeah, great, let's add it in. Um, Profits were at an all-time high. So just being forced on a dime to make sure that what we were doing was mission critical forced us to get really tight really fast. Just from like a messaging and from a product prioritization perspective to making sure we were focusing on things where we could demonstrate like here are the numbers brokers of why this makes sense, like here's what we're going to be able to do for you. So I think that's been challenging. I think it's a challenge we've overcome. um, the other challenge I think is just continuing to find the best people possible to come in, and I actually have hired a lot of folks from outside the industry. And I've gotten uh, people have questioned that at times. And I think our results speak for themselves at this point. And everyone has to get their foot in the door in freight somehow. But I think just like building a great team has been both the most rewarding and the hardest thing I've done. Like finding those people who you really can trust and want to build with.
Is there anything you've noticed in, because I'm speaking as someone who just maybe, I don't know if I suck at identifying talent, but I've missed a lot of times when I thought I was hitting a home run with someone. And I'm just curious from your experience, because when you come into the CEO role, especially with a team that's not big, when I started, mine was 25 people. So yours was, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people or something in
Hmm.
that nature of what it is
Yep.
now. Um, there's not a great playbook on how to hire, and especially if it's not something you're well versed in or have experience in. So you start interviewing people. What for you is what you're looking for in, or what you've seen as a pattern in some of the best people you've hired?
Yeah. A couple of things. One is like sounds obvious, but just like a demonstrated track record of results. I joke with one of my direct reports. She said in the interview, like, I asked her why I should hire her, and she said, because I've succeeded at everything I've ever tried to do. And I was like, well, that's a great point. I love that confidence too.
Ah,
You're on. So I think just like getting someone who's I don't really care what you've done because I believe in the power of smart people to figure things out. Just like I would be such a hypocrite if I didn't. I was thrown into this and I figured it out. So as long as you've succeeded at things and thrown, kind of numbers on the board, points on the board, that's probably the biggest thing. I also, um, and when it comes to interviewing, I get really specific with people. Like I'm very detail oriented, very numbers driven. So I like to really drill in to validate what I'm hearing and ask for several examples. That's one thing. I think the second is understanding how they work in a group and how they kind of bring others along on their journey. And that is admittedly hard to test for an interview because everyone's showing up to an interview and their best self. So um, I think like taking note of kind of the signals around how they follow up with you and doing like reference checks are so critical to the hiring process to understand how did this person show up in a previous role. I think that's helped me just hire some absolute all stars.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
What would you say for yourself? Like, I don't know. I started thinking as you were talking about how someone shows up in a group, just kind of character flaws that people have. I don't know why that took me down that path, but in the interest of giving you a chance to maybe be vulnerable as someone who's trying to build your own kind of brand in the industry and maybe show a little bit of the downside. It just the reason that maybe I'm going down this path is as I've started listening to more people on podcasts, I'm noticing that people tend to spend a lot of time just talking about all the things they're great at and all the wonderful things they've done. Um, and I've noticed that people who I know aren't necessarily being super truthful. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm running into this issue myself, or I'm just kind of believing everything someone's telling me and it's all rainbows and butterflies. So, like, maybe I should open the door more for people to be more honest about the other side of the coin. So,
Yeah.
what's something that you're personally working on, or something that you recognize as a character flaw in your own leadership style or your own work style, or something that you're just not good at, and needing to improve?
Patience. I am so impatient in every part of my life. This spans personal and professional, where I think about, oh, okay, I want this. Okay, I need it done like now. And professionally, I've had to be really mindful of that because as the leader of the business, like everything I say, and I'm curious if you felt this way, but like people listen and respond to you in a different way than anyone, which is obvious. Like you're the head honcho, but restraining myself and embracing kind of the pause between stimulus and reaction has been something that has been such an unlock for me when it comes to working with teams and building my team and making sure that we're making good decisions because I do have a tendency. I think it's a great thing. I have an insane bias to action, and I think that's led to a lot of great results. But I think it's also been a downfall. It can confuse people sometimes. It can make them feel like I don't trust them. If I say something, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. So, and then personally, like, I mean, it just drives people crazy. I think sometimes.
So you're hitting, you and I are very similar in this regard. And it took me a while. It took my team actually pointing this out. I just didn't think about it that I'm talking as the CEO to someone. Oftentimes I was
Yep.
just thinking of like, I'm talking as someone who's trying to solve this issue. And I had the
Yep.
same bias to action. I don't know if you're an Enneagram fan, but my exec coach had me go through this whole Enneagram process. I'm an active controller, an eight, but part of it is
I'm an
you
eight
look
as
at,
well.
yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but you can either be like, there's like a triangle of kind of how we respond to situations. So you kind of said stimulus response, and it's like you're either feelings based, action based, or thought based, and like it's when something happens, you either go to your feelings and like really kind of sit with it and get caught in the emotion of it. You go to your thoughts and you spend a lot of time thinking through like, okay, what are the different options we can do, or action based, where it's literally like you are more prone to just respond instinctively than rely on either of the other two processes. And I am in the action camp. And
Yep.
just like you, like the examples you described were a big problem for me. um, and I just think about like, I had to get to a place where I would intentionally try not to message, Slack, or text people after hours.
Yep.
Because I forget, it's like the CEO's texting me at 7 o'clock about this issue. Now I've created a pressure for them to feel like they need to respond, which is not
Totally.
the environment you necessarily want to create for your team. And that same thing, it's like, I just want to get a problem fixed. I'm like, okay, that person's busy. I'll just handle it. And
Yeah.
then I'm off to go handle it. Meanwhile, this employee is sitting there thinking like, wow, he doesn't trust me anymore. Like I just lost the buy-in of the CEO because I was, busy in another meeting that was pre-planned, and he just got an email and he wanted to respond and deal with it. And so he ran with it. That was a big problem for me. So, um,
I can relate to all of that. I schedule a lot of messages on Slack now because I want to create a healthy work environment and I want to be mindful of, again, like you said, you know, I don't want someone getting a random ping about an idea I had that I just fired off on my phone at 10 o'clock at night. But so I try to be really mindful around that. And I do think it is the unlock to building an awesome business is being able to not solve everything as yourself. Like I think about it all the time, and it's something I work on with my executive coach too, is I should be hiring leaders and they need to be leading their teams, and working through them and empowering them to make decisions is the only way to scale yourself. And I think um, we're like I've got such a kick-ass team right now, and I probably still drive them crazy sometimes. They can tell me that, but uh, the fewer actual decisions I have to be involved with, I think the better for the business.
I think that's probably right. And I'm curious, if you had to give yourself a grade 1 to 10, one being you recognize this is a problem, but you're completely incapable of solving it today because whether you don't have the emotional depth or restraint or whatever, to 10, where you recognize it was a problem and you've pretty much fully solved it and you don't have this issue anymore. I'll answer mine as well. Where do you think you stand on this?
I'm going to ask my team this tomorrow. I give myself, I'm definitely closer to having it solved, but I slip up all the time. So I don't know, 6 or 7. That like I think I do a lot of the times. This, like, the slip ups. I email someone, and I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't finish that thought. I got to email them again. Those sort of things definitely still happen. But from a overall perspective, I think I've put so much work into getting really clear with the team on, like, here are the priorities, here are the things that matter, here's who owns those. You guys own them. I'm here to help unblock, elevate, solve, tackle. Otherwise, like, this is on you as the owner. I think I've made a lot of progress there. I honestly think in my personal life is where I need to be more patient. I started playing golf like last year, and
Oh, well, you're screwed there.
it's so bad, and I
That's
love
a
it.
problem that nobody is able to solve, or most of us can't.
But I think I think it is so good for me to be playing it as much as I am, because it's really healthy to suck at something, I think. And I it's been a long process of learning to accept that I can't just go to the driving range 10 times and be a, sub 90 golfer. It's going to have to, this is going to be painful. And that result that I put on the board is not a reflection of who I am as an individual. Like I'll walk off the course with a 104 and be like, I suck as a person. And that's not true. So I'm working on it, the personal side as well.
That's good. If to score myself, I'm not where you are. I'm probably like a 3.7 out of 10. And
Or,
I think I
or
was
you're
a
just a lot
I
more
think I was
honest than I am.
no, I think I was a 1.5 when I was at the end of my time with Molo, and I think that having 11 months where I wasn't working and actually could spend all this time with a therapist and a coach and like look at this stuff without the pressure of the business, because that was the problem. Is like I always
Yeah.
understood it, and I clearly could see how this character flaw was impacting the business, but then like the problem would happen in the business, and I just would prioritize trying to solve it, and I just refused to stop and think. And anyone that got in my way was my fault. So I see it a lot more now, and without the pressure of the business all the time, I'm able to kind of manage it a little bit better, but there's still work to be done there. So I do appreciate you sharing that, though. I think I need to spend more time trying to get into this kind of stuff on the show. Not that the rest has not
Yeah,
been great, um, but I think opening up more is certainly one way to build some rapport with people. I think if your team listens
definitely.
to this too, I think they might have a little bit more grace for you next time it happens, recognizing it's something that is not something you're perfect at.
Totally. It's not, it's, we talk a lot about assuming positive intent, and we do. I think we do a great job of it. And that's where I am fortunate to get a lot of grace, is something I'm working on.
That's assuming positive intent is something I think a lot of people could benefit from, myself included.
Yeah.
So,
You just never know what's going on in someone's life. And it's, it's so true.
so let's wrap with one more thing. Let's go back to the business. As you think about 2024 and beyond, like what do you see as the future for trucker tools, and you know what do we have to be excited about with what's going on in the business?
Yeah. So on the visibility side, like I said, I think we're still in the early innings there of all of the visibility is really just a series of integrations ultimately, like TMS integrations, ELD integrations, API integrations, mobile app being integrated onto a driver's phone. So a lot of that is just building up our scale there, but we're thinking about how do we get more proactive with visibility management this year. So kind of traditionally in the visibility era we've been in, it's you run the track, it tracks or it doesn't track. And then if it doesn't track, you got to go in, you got to troubleshoot and figure out what happened. We want to eliminate that from the workflow and instead make visibility something that's kind of just always there in the background. And you're notified when something is going wrong, to be more proactive in the way we're managing it. So that, again, these brokerages have massive, massive tracking teams still. Like you would think check calls were a thing of the past. They're not. And a lot of it is
No.
just to be there in case something goes wrong. So we want to think about how do we let those people focus on much, much more constructive activities and just get notified when they might need to take a look at something. So that's where we're moving on the visibility front. On the capacity front, we've got a carrier sourcing tool coming out or we've got a new capacity tool coming out over the next couple of months that we're really pumped about, that we think is going to be a real game changer when it comes to building a lot of lane strength. So that's something we're going to be sharing more about over the next month or two that I can't share too much more on right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, if maybe we talk about that sponsorship, and I can help you share it in 2 months when it's ready.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be
So,
great. That would be great.
all right. Well, listen, it's been great. I'm trying to get these to not be so long, but I start talking with my guests, and people like you are so interesting. I just want to keep going. We're up over 90 minutes again, and but it's great. I mean, I just really enjoyed this. I'm very grateful to you for coming on and being as honest and open as you have been. It's been great getting to know you and learning about your business and yourself.
Likewise, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to come on, and I feel like I'm feeling a little bit of like, oh man, did I say too much at points? Which I think is good. That's where you want to get people to actually get to know them. I like the format.
I've had a lot of people who tell me within a week or two of coming on that they have new customers who are reaching out to him. And I think a lot of it's just people who appreciate someone being kind of open and honest. So definitely appreciate you. And to our listeners, thank you for, I won't use, well, thank you for joining us for 95 minutes. I won't say the word enduring. I think this was great, and you guys probably really enjoyed Kary and her story. So that's all we got from the Freight Pod this week. You will be seeing more episodes soon.